Last night I had a dream that I was in a school for chariot type gladiator fighters. They were young in school, I mean like a high school type thing, or early college. And that I was the head of a team, and I was very unprepared for the contest my group was going to have to wage against another very competent group. An extra 45 pesos, $15. You can be up on top, get all your drinks free. And I don't know what the other benefit is. Hopefully you can leave this cabin here and go elsewhere, or you don't have the glass to shoot through. Another interesting thing is whenever I've loaded onto any tour boat, there's always been the Argentine Navy or Coast Guard here to watch for some reason. What they're watching for, I do not have a clue. My guess is it simply is another way of keeping people employed. The irony is, to me, I would bet that when you create useless jobs and pay for it, you undermine or slow down the growth of your economy rather than accelerate it. That's Zhao Zhao, the very expensive elite place that Sally talked her way into for tea. Apparently you have to get permission before you even go. Also a negative of that employment practice is that people have no real respect for what they do because they don't really do anything, those kind of people.
Al barco que se quedó, que ahora nos va a alcanzar. No nos va a alcanzar.
Yesterday, I believe, up on top of that area there, not on the top, but near it. That Cathedral. Park National Nahuel Huapi, which was created by Perito Moreno after he had visited Yellowstone National Park in the late 1800s, and returned here to establish this park with the same ethic of Yellowstone, at least the ethic it had then. Interesting cloud formation. Okay, where the black spot is where we began. We're following the arrow to the right, which will bring us up into this area, which is okay, right now we're going the opposite direction of the arrow. Going the opposite direction of the arrow into whatever the name of this port is, Bahia Anchorena, to Puerto Anchorena, where there are various places we can hike. Okay, this is the Arrayan tree, and that's why we've stopped here. It is a member of the eucalyptus tree, which accounts for the bark falling off, but I wonder if larch is also part of that, because that's what it reminds me of. Here it is unique in that on this island only, these trees grow to this tree height, whereas elsewhere it's just a bush, and that's what makes it unique. The explanation Joe, or Martin, thought, Martin, is that here there's enough light from the canopy above to allow these trees to grow in a unique soil here for them, whereas elsewhere it's not the case. I don't know that that's valid, at least if it is, I don't understand it clearly. Here's an example of another kind of building block made out of brick-like material. This one is 6 components, or 6 cavities, whereas the other one I've seen is probably a rectangular square, if you will. This gives a pretty good sense of the size of these. And over here an even larger one, and back over there even larger. It would be interesting if I could get on the internet and find out what the reason is for this, because it has to be somewhat unique. I'm just curious, since this is an island, whether it has anything to do with the new island concept of evolution. I'm guessing it might not, because while it's an island, it's not that far away from the surrounding land. One thing that bothers the credibility of his explanation is that these huge trees are here and do provide some block, to the canopy. Here another thick stand. And here it almost looks like it's vine in size. And here's just a huge concentration of them. And apparently it's an extremely hard wood, and he said that it's very cool to the touch, and it is cool. Kind of thing you'd put your face next to in the summertime, and he said it's because it's only a micromillimeter thick, and there you're against the actual wood and the flow of presumably the sap. And I wonder if this gentle movement that we see, or not movement, but gentle directional shift from left to right is a reflection of access or desire for light, or if there's any relevance at all. It may not even be a pattern. Maybe I can go home and translate this. Do you know how this reproduces? It is interesting also that there's very little vegetation underneath wherever the concentration of it is. I wonder if it has a creosote capacity. The unique sensation here is the color. This dominance of a light, slightly reddish brown, but light color. Now notice the bark here, this is very different. And there's also like an orchid parasite, or at least a cohabitant on the tree. And here apparently is a cypress de la Cordillera, which I think means the mountain range, cypress of the mountains. I guess it's these narrow trees here. I always think spider webs are fascinating, particularly when they have curves in their web like this one does. Walking down here, you get that same sense of that light wood color. Ironically, it's a similar color to the stained railings of the walkway here. Very nicely done. It's definitely this park. This was donated as a park by the family that owned it back in the early 1900s. They still retain a 4-hectare estancia on the south end of the island for their home, and although they don't live here any longer, I don't think. Apparently it's an extremely hard wood too. I wonder what special uses are made of it. It does look different. Either it's lost a lot of bark, it's very old, or something's different about it. It's much more gray and light brown without the goldenness. Now we start to get back into a mix of these trees and the big giant ones. And the Latin name for it. This must have been an earlier trail, and the trees have grown right up through it. This is abandoned for this. Actually, it's a very superb walkway on wood. Some idea of the thickness of the big trees, whatever they are. Again, the theory seems a little bit suspect. It's dark and well shaded in here, and there's a mix of the Arrayanes and the bigger trees right down here. Apparently, though, he did say that the greatest concentration of these trees is in the center of the island. Again, apparently due to soil and light access. This is a lovely island park that the family left to the posterity of Argentina and the world. elegant old tour ship. Look at that anchor alone. The Modesta Victoria. Modesta Victoria. Wonder what fascinating people this ship has carried. Reminds me of the boat we had for that Indonesia trip. Look how beautifully clear the water is.
Un aplauso.
My mantra for this trip is to live in the moment. In other words, stay connected to this point in time, during this point in time, every bit of time that I think about it. And as I sit here, or stand here now on the boat, I feel the hot sun on my back. Hot just because it's the sun. In other words, the weather, the temperature is relatively cool. And then I feel the cool breeze coming straight at me. I see the blue and the clouds and the greens and this rich blue and the sea. And in the background, of course, the thunder of those two engines. No dolphins here. I think we're going to round this point here to the left into a bay for another hike through the woods. So this is literally a totally replanted area because it was all cut down before 1918 or something like that, 26 or something like that. This is a California redwood. It grows much faster here because it doesn't have the animals and so forth that would attack it, or in the ecosystem that might be harsh for it. What it reflects is once we've destroyed, or someone's destroyed an area, we try to rebuild it, in this instance with exotics, which is a nice way of saying we did not restore it to its native fauna.
Cold water and wet place grows very close to the lakes, but it wasn't cut because it grows with many branches, very twisted. You can take and strike part of the tree to use wood. But in this case, we cut the tree and use only pines. They are invading the other territory. Yes. Yeah. Well,
our modern philosophy, of course, with management of a park is that you don't introduce anything exotic, you try to remove that. So having recognized that the people made a mistake, as they did elsewhere in the world, including the United States, back in the early part of the 19th century, their plan here now is to start cutting these down and replace them with the native plants in the hopes that someday they can restore the native fauna. Some early pictures, I think, of the early ranger's home and the dock at the for the park, Don Arrayan and Arrayan. It was interesting because all throughout the experimental, and we're still in it, and you can see it, for whatever the reason, the trees were planted in rows, no doubt because it is scientific and not meant to be with a primary goal of aesthetic. And yet it almost looks like on this side of the trail we're back to a mix of trees. I think this is a map of the original layout of, or description, if you will, of trees cut down, experimental areas, attempts to replace with natural, and so forth. Can't understand it, but I think that's what it's about. This lovely trail is very nice, very substantial railings, parallels the shore of the island, and apparently we're going to an outlook where we'll have a better view, a mirador. You can see even here we're still in the experimental area, so it was a rather large experimental area. To redo this into the native will be quite an achievement. Just the removal of the trees will be quite an achievement, since it's normally their habit to take things like this and just cut them down and leave them where they fall. The other problem is, how do you get rid of generations full of seeds lying dormant in these pine needles and perhaps even the soil? It is funny to be walking through a fairly substantial pine forest and seeing the trees all laid out in rows. It continually stops you. It's so alien, of course, to nature's natural design. But you imagine the resource of wood when you look at the size of planks being used. And these look like 8 or 10 by 10s. Same with the planks, probably 8 by 3. That's a pretty big piece of lumber for what it's doing. And the irony is, this almost starts to become boring, and you start evaluating the quality of the spectacularness. This is an outstanding scene anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world, but it doesn't even begin to compare with some of the other scenes nearby, and lots of them, and giant lakes, and lots of them, and small ones, and lots of them. This is a close-up of my favorite flower, but after it's been ravaged by some time since its earlier beauty.
The brother had told her it was better to do the small one, the one that you did.
Yeah, because she said when you go, like the first.
Here, a nice addition. Some benches. Beautiful benches. Those could be commercially sold in Jackson quite easily. Incidentally, I believe these are the ponderosa pine, ergo their straightness and the lovely pine smell. The thing that you notice whenever you're in the woods or the forest is the complete absence of animals. Squirrels, mice, deer. They've got 2 imported deer here, plus imported pigs, what do they call those things? Because it once was a hunting lodge. on the island. That may be the condor up there. They're pretty prevalent all over. Fortunately, even though everything we're looking at is probably an exotic, it is pretty. And the tree in front of us is particularly pretty, with almost those Christmas tree bulb type of hangings of needles or whatever they are. This is such a lovely respite, anytime, anywhere in the world, to walk through the forest on a trail and nobody else around that you can hear. These are some early pictures of that period of time when they were had cut down all the trees and apparently were starting to replant some. I was probably wrong because these are acacia and they look very similar to what I was photographing, so I'm just guessing they're all acacia except for the occasional redwood. I think these are the redwoods because I believe it's because they have this bark that's so soft it pushes right in. This is one of the earlier native trees that could not compete with the faster growing, higher growing, canopy covering, apparently acacia that's all around it, although that one may be the redwood, I don't really know. Even though this may be the experimental part of the park, it's fairly obvious that someone envisioned an aesthetic future because this hallway, if you will, of what I think are redwoods is certainly that. Even at the young age of 60 to 80 years old, these redwoods are an impressive looking tree. Again, reminding one of Lord of the Rings, something like that. I think this was called a Monterey cypress, guess where, but it was put in as a windbreak to protect all of the experimental trees. Can you imagine if there were fauna, how much would be living in there? And another windbreak beyond it. There's a nice smell of pine here. And this is their view. And this is their sleeping Indian, but I don't know which way it's facing.